This testimony comes from a young lady from Ghana. I thank God for forgiving me despite all the wicked things I have done. I am deeply grateful to my pastor for standing by me through these difficult times. My family also stood by me after everything I put them through, and I will always be thankful for their support. From childhood, I was trained in the marine kingdom to destroy lives. That was my sole purpose. Back in those days, whenever I needed to attend meetings in the marine kingdom, I would transform into a serpent. I would slip outside and lie down in the compound. Our house was a compound house with other tenants living there. I would stretch out on the floor and begin transforming from the lower half of my body upward. You see, if I tried to transform from the top down, someone might catch sight of me mid-change. The process is slow, but it is fastest when you start from the feet and work your way up to the head. Once I had fully become a serpent, I would search for any body of water I could find, a stream, a puddle, even water that someone had casually poured onto the street. The moment my serpent body touched that water, I would transform into a spirit and vanish into the marine kingdom. There was one particular evening when I had just finished my transformation when a man spotted me. He began screaming at the top of his lungs, "Snake! Snake!" Fortunately, I managed to disappear before he could do anything. But fate would have us cross paths again. While I was slithering along another path, still searching for water to make my escape, I ran into the very same man. This time, he muttered aloud to himself that if he didn't kill that serpent, he was no man at all. He grabbed a branch from a nearby tree and hurled it at me. By the grace of whatever dark power I served, the branch missed my head and struck my side instead. I writhed and twisted desperately. The force of the blows sent me tumbling backward, and I landed in a pool of water. In that instant, I vanished and reappeared in the marine kingdom. When I later returned to my human form, I discovered a severe bruise on my side, right on my waist and my arm. I knew people would ask questions, so I had to come up with a lie for cover-up. I feared that if anyone connected the girl to the serpent, suspicion would fall on me. So I deliberately provoked my mother into a rage, knowing she would beat me. Afterward, whenever anyone asked about the mark on my waist, I simply said my mother had beaten me, and that I had accidentally bumped into something as well. When I returned to the marine kingdom for my next assignment, the Marine Queen, the Queen of the Sea herself, noticed the bruise while I was shifting from serpent form into another creature. The Queen demanded to know what had happened. I recounted how a man had tried to murder me in my serpent form. The Queen told me to focus on my assignment, promising that she would deal with the man who had dared to attack one of her own. My next mission took me to another city. To reach the specific house I had been sent to destroy, I had to travel from one bus station to another. At one of those stations, I came face to face with the wife of the pastor I had been assigned to ruin. But this was no coincidence. I had already planted myself in the woman's dreams. We have the power to enter people's dreams, and this woman had already seen me in a vision before we ever met in the flesh. To keep things simple, I played the part of a helpless, innocent girl in desperate need of aid. When the pastor's wife saw my pitiful state, she began asking questions. I explained that I had come to meet friends at the station, but because I arrived late, they had already left. I honestly didn't even know the name of the place they were headed to. I was completely stranded. The pastor's wife, moved with compassion, told me not to worry. She would take me to their home where I could stay until I managed to contact my friends and figure out my next move. I carefully asked whether she was married, whether she had a family. I didn't want to be a burden. She assured me that she had a husband who was a pastor, and 2 children. We got into the car together and drove to her house. By the time we arrived, I had already fallen asleep before the husband even came home. The following morning, the husband asked his wife why she hadn't returned from her trip as planned. The wife introduced me to him, someone he had certainly never seen before. She told him how she had found me at the station, looking utterly lost and in genuine need of help. Because of my situation, she had abandoned her own journey to assist me. The husband, being a pastor, was not pleased that his wife had brought a stranger into their home without consulting him first. But he shrugged it off, saying what was done, and told his wife to do whatever she thought best. That very evening, before I could transform, the pastor began praying. He prayed with such heavenly fire that the entire house seemed ablaze with spiritual intensity. I couldn't find any opening to transform. The house was literally on fire with prayer. Even the room I was in burned with that same holy presence, leaving me no peace of mind to carry out my dark work. I was trapped in a state of pure agony. The atmosphere was suffocating. I couldn't simply walk out. The pastor would ask where I was going. My only option was to stay put, though I was already running dangerously late for my meeting in the Marine Kingdom. That evening, I could not make it to the meeting. The following evening, I went to the meeting at the Marine Kingdom very early so that if the pastor prayed again, I would not be trapped by the power of the prayers. When I got there, no one had arrived yet, not even my colleagues or the Queen herself. On my way back after the meeting, the pastor was still praying, and the whole house was on fire. There were also angels standing in front of the house. I had to find a way to get back into my body before a certain time, but the pastor continued praying. I remembered that the pastor's children do not pray at all, and his wife is also lazy. She is always asleep whenever her husband prays. So, I cast a very strong spell on one of his children, and the child suddenly fell sick and became extremely hot. The child started signaling to his mother by tapping her. When his wife woke up and checked what was wrong, she suddenly shouted, "Jesus! Jesus!" And I said to myself, "Look at her, whose name are you calling?" Fearfully, she started calling her husband in the middle of his intense prayers, and because of how terrified she was, her husband stopped praying to attend to her. After some time, I saw that the fire around the house started dying down, and the angels left. I believe the angels did not interfere because I attacked the child instead of the pastor himself. I quickly entered after the fire had gone down, and returned to my body. Because the child fell ill and remained sick for some time, the pastor's prayer routine fell apart. There were days he didn't pray at all. Since I was now helping around the house, the wife entrusted me with most of the chores. I served them so diligently that one day, the pastor's wife asked me to make their bed. I seized the opportunity. I cast spells into the mattress and bedding, so that whenever the man lay with his wife, he could no longer perform his marital duties properly. One day, the pastor asked me how I was doing, and I said in my head, "You and I, who is supposed to be asked that question?" And I said, "I am fine." He asked again where I was going to and said in my head again, "What business is it of yours where I'm going?" I told him I was going out to see a friend. The pastor was puzzled. I had only just arrived, how could I already have friends? I thought to myself that it was none of his concern. Eventually, the pastor went for a medical checkup because of his performance issues with his wife. Remarkably, he ended up at a hospital where I had already made spiritual contact with the doctor. I instructed the doctor that whenever the pastor came in, he should advise him to stop praying so much at midnight, and she should advise him that lack of sleep was destroying his sex drive and ruining his ability to perform. I threatened the doctor spiritually. If she failed to deliver this message exactly as instructed, when the pastor's prayer exposed her, she would also mention her name and let everyone know all the evil deeds she does at the hospital. The doctor, who was also a witch, agreed and fed the pastor this poisonous counsel. The pastor's prayer life deteriorated further. As weeks passed, he stopped praying for stretches at a time. Instead of rising at dawn to bathe and pray, he would sleep straight through until morning. He reached a point where he wasn't praying at all. That was when I struck. I cast a heavy spell of lust upon him. Because he was spiritually defenseless by then, the spell took hold completely, and he ended up sleeping with me. The assignment was finished. I had executed it perfectly, all because he had let his prayer life collapse. Let this be a warning to everyone. keep praying, as the Word of God commands. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 17. Pray without ceasing. The Apostle Paul knew exactly why he said this. Prayer is the very lifeblood of a believer. The Scriptures also warn us, 1 Corinthians 6 verse 18. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. God did not give us these commandments as a joke. They exist to shield us from the enemy's traps. Yet because we often see God's law as burdensome, we ignore what is actually meant for our own protection. There is another thing I deeply regret. Once, there was a family friend who loved me dearly, a man who bought me nearly anything I asked for. He cared so much for me and my family that he even planned to purchase land for us, so we could move into a comfortable new home. He went so far as to buy me a brand new iPhone. One day, I decided to visit him. But first I told one of my friends to load a mobile phone with as much pornography as possible. I offered to pay whatever price necessary to have those videos ready. That day, as I made my way to the man's house, my friend met me on time with the phone. I grabbed it and continued on my way. When I arrived, the man told me to help myself to anything in the fridge, eat whatever I liked, and if I grew tired, there was a spare bedroom where I could rest before heading home. I settled into the room, relaxing on the bed and watching the pornographic videos I had brought. Suddenly, the man knocked and entered. He stared in shock. "What is this? You're a bad girl. What are you watching?" I replied casually. "Oh, this is nice. I'm not a child. I'm above legal age, so I can watch it." He told me this was not appropriate. I insisted. "But I'm of age. It's not a problem." He relented with a reluctant, "Okay." Then I pushed further. "Since these things are nice, let's try them." Because the man was like an uncle to my mother, he laughed it off as a joke and turned to leave. But I pressed him a second time. "I'm old enough. We can try this. It wouldn't be a bad idea." Finally, he said, "Okay, let's go to my room." The moment we stepped inside and he turned toward me, I unleashed a powerful spell of lust, one heavy, crushing spell. The man was instantly consumed with desire for me. I stripped off my dress and slipped into bed with him. We did it. And just like that, I had him. I destroyed him. I did this to my mother's friend, a man who had been family to us, solely to ruin his livelihood and his life. He grew so poor that his businesses began collapsing one by one. Things became so desperate that he had to sell the very land his mother had left him. After selling the land, he brought the cash home. I paid him a visit. When I arrived, he had stacked the money on the table and was in the process of counting it, planning his next move. I sat there watching him as he counted. When he finished, he said he needed to step outside for a moment. Since I would be in the house, he asked me to keep an eye on the money. He'd be back shortly. He just had something to take care of. In my mind, I scoffed. "Am I a bank? Why should I guard your money for you?" Spiritually, I claimed the entire sum and transferred it to my room. I can tell you that the money merely vanished physically. The cash literally teleported from the table into my room. When the man returned and found the table bare, he confronted me. "Where is the money I left here?" I played dumb, claiming I didn't remember him leaving any money behind. He reminded me. "Didn't I tell you I was going into town to buy something and would be right back? I asked you to watch the money?" I twisted his words, saying he claimed he was putting the money in a bag to take to town, but had simply left it there instead. He stared in disbelief. "The money is gone. There's nothing here." "What do you mean?" I told him coldly that if he couldn't find it on the table, it wasn't my fault. The man exploded with anger. But when he looked at me and saw the murderous glare in my eyes, he began calling me a thief, accusing me of stealing his money. I responded with chilling calm. "Since you're calling me a thief and I want to clear my name, let's go to my room and check. If the money isn't there, then I'll be furious too. He agreed. Fine. Let's go check if you've hidden my money in your room. When we entered, his money was lying right there on my bed. Yet he couldn't see it. He stripped the bedsheets, lifted the mattress, shook it violently, searching every corner to make sure the cash wasn't concealed. The money was right there in plain sight. Anyone with spiritual eyes could see it. But he had no spiritual sight. He was blind to the supernatural, and so the money remained invisible to him even as it sat in front of his face. At that, I burst into laughter and marched out of the house so brazenly that the man ordered me to leave. I told him it was already dark and I couldn't go out at night. He shouted that I should get out anyway. That evening, when I reported to the Marine Kingdom, they were overjoyed. I had completed 2 missions. They promoted me to a higher rank. I was thrilled. I couldn't stand seeing that man prosper, and I had destroyed him. But the spirit of darkness living inside me was the true driver of all these deeds. I felt no remorse. There were rare moments when I felt a pang of guilt about what I was doing, but those feelings never lasted. Most of the time, I was simply elated by my promotion. If you are listening to this testimony, understand this, Ephesians 6 verse 12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Prayer and righteousness must go hand in hand. They are absolutely vital. When you neglect your prayer life, you open yourself to ruin. Anyone who treats righteousness lightly and lives in casual sin gives God reason to step back and let the devil have his way. Look at the story of Job 1 verses 6 to 10. There was a meeting in heaven, and the devil appeared before the Lord. God asked, "Have you considered my servant Job?" The devil answered, "Yes, because you have built a hedge around him, protecting everything he has. If you remove your hand, let's see if he doesn't curse you to your face." The devil and his kingdom of darkness are always probing, always testing, looking for the weakest moment to strike. Even if you have done nothing wrong, they will still test you. All they care about is climbing higher in the ranks of darkness. They have no loyalty. They will destroy their own mother, their own child, without hesitation. Because the spirit behind all this is a spirit of darkness, and darkness has no good. At that, I burst into laughter and marched out of the house so brazenly that the man ordered me to leave. I told him it was already dark and I couldn't go out at night. He shouted that I should get out anyway. That evening, when I reported to the Marine Kingdom, they were overjoyed. I had completed 2 missions. They promoted me to a higher rank. I was thrilled. I couldn't stand seeing that man prosper, and I had destroyed him. But the spirit of darkness living inside me was the true driver of all these deeds. I felt no remorse. There were rare moments when I felt a pang of guilt about what I was doing, but those feelings never lasted. Most of the time, I was simply elated by my promotion. If you are listening to this testimony, understand this, Ephesians 6 verse 12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Prayer and righteousness must go hand in hand. They are absolutely vital. When you neglect your prayer life, you open yourself to ruin. Anyone who treats righteousness lightly and lives in casual sin gives God reason to step back and let the devil have his way. Look at the story of Job 1 verses 6 to 10. There was a meeting in heaven, and the devil appeared before the Lord. God asked, "Have you considered my servant Job?" The devil answered, "Yes, because you have built a hedge around him, protecting everything he has. If you remove your hand, let's see if he doesn't curse you to your face." The devil and his kingdom of darkness are always probing, always testing, looking for the weakest moment to strike. Even if you have done nothing wrong, they will still test you. All they care about is climbing higher in the ranks of darkness. They have no loyalty. They will destroy their own mother, their own child, without hesitation. Because the spirit behind all this is a spirit of darkness, and darkness has no good intentions whatsoever. If you have a testimony you would like to share, feel free to send it to us at truetestimonyofthesaints@gmail.com. Like and subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll get quick updates next time there's a new video.